lecture and tutorial, and today we have a guest lecturer, and I want to introduce him in some minutes. And before, I want to remember our last lecture. And if you remember, we had a discussion about some general valid leadership styles. If you remember, I had a meeting at the colloquium in Harvard Business School with top executives and some academic teachers there. And we put our heads together and we had the idea to find out which classification of leadership styles can we find from a theoretical background and a practical background. And then we had found a classification and some leadership styles in general we want to discuss. And these leadership styles are valid, and you can see them in the practical behaviors, attitudes, and you will find them also in research. And if you remember, we had discussed one style at the beginning, and this style is the coercive leadership style. The coercive leadership style. And we had discussed this, and we had found out you can describe this style in one sentence. And one sentence has been which sentence? If you remember, coercive leadership style. If you remember, what was the sentence? What was the sentence? Coercive. Think on coercive leadership style. What is coercive leadership style?
To be kind of dominant, I guess.
Yes, to be kind of dominant and leading with pressure.
And do what I want.
Yes, very good. Do what I say. Do what I say was the message. Do what I say was the message, and it's immediate compliance. And it is especially useful in which situations? So because we want to match theory and practice. In which situation is coercive leadership style especially interesting? Please. In critical situations. What, for example, which critical situation? Crisis.
Yes, turning point.
Turnaround situation, for example. Very good. Crisis, critical situation. Other ideas. Other ideas. Okay, critical, crisis. And what is the problem? You have, I mentioned last time that if you are leading, you have sometimes the question that you are balancing your behavior, balancing your attitudes. You can say, do what I say, this has an outcome. But on the other hand, you have to think on consequences. And the consequences could be which one? What is the consequence? For that, you have to balance your leadership behavior in a coercive leadership style. Do what I say. What is the consequence? What could be a consequence which weakens your leadership behavior? And so you have to balance. What could be the consequence? Here.
They don't obey.
Okay, they don't obey.
Whatever essentially don't want to do what they say.
Okay, and what is the consequence? If they don't obey, do not listen. What is the consequence? If you think on a very, very important consequence for you as a leader with your followers in a team. What is important?
They don't respect you anymore.
They don't respect me anymore. In the future, maybe. But what else? What is the first practical step if you are leading a team? Cohesion and all the things. But what could be a problem if you are too much coercive, even in a turnaround situation? What could be a problem? The problem could be a motivational problem. If you are thinking on the motivation strategies. We talked about internal, external. So it could be possible that intrinsic motivation could be reduced if you are not balancing your style. So, coercive. Now we had another leadership style. It was authoritative. The authoritative leadership style. What is the effect of authoritative leadership style? The leadership style mobilizes people in which direction? In which direction? Any ideas? Here, in which direction? You. Any idea? Mobilizes people in what direction? Also, authoritative leadership style. Do you have an idea? It mobilizes me. Yeah.
Sorry.
Okay. Any other ideas? It mobilizes the followers in the direction of a vision, of your vision. Authoritative leadership style. It provides an overarching goal. If you think of the goal structure in a company, what goal structures do you know in a company? What goal structure? There are 3 levels. 3 levels of goals in a company. Which are the 3 levels? Anybody an idea? Pardon? Anybody have an idea? There is a strategic level, visionary level. Then is department level, unit level, next one. And the lowest one is what?
And you want to make profit.
Profit? It is the individual level. It is the individual level.
It's also the level of concerning the company.
Yes, creating maybe an outcome, creating gains, no losses, and then you have a vice versa situation. Strategic, unit, lower or individual level. So, authoritative style mobilizes people in the right visionary direction and is most effective in which situation? You have always the question, this is a behavior, this is the leadership attitude, the leadership style, but the other question is even at the same level, what is the practical outcome? How is the practical outcome? Authoritative leadership style. The approach is most effective in which situation? What do you think? Authoritative, vision, goals, practical. Think practical. What do you think? It is most practical when your company really is in a big sea, stormy, and like a red ocean, and it needs direction. You are needing direction in the company, authoritative leadership style. The style, but you have to think on the other side. What is the weakness of the style? In which situation is this style not working? In which situation? Think practically. Authoritative leadership style is less successful when the leader works with who? It's a special situation. When does this style does not work exactly? What do you think? Have you ever worked in a university in a researcher's team? In a team from experts? Then it could be not working. Because if the leader is working with a team of experts who has more knowledge and more experience, then the team could be disagreed with this approach. So think on both sides. This is the style number 2. Now we have a style number 3. We have found out. It is the style we call affiliative. What is the affiliative leadership style? Affiliative leadership style. What could be a short message of the affiliative leadership style? This is the style people first. Affiliative leadership style, people first. What is the meaning? What is the creation outcome? What do you seeking? What do you seek if you lead with affiliative leadership style? What is your creation? What is your philosophy? What is your philosophy? If you think on our style approach, the Blake and Newton leadership grid, and there was a style, it's called middle of the road management. And the middle of the road management, 5.5, if you remember, what was middle of the road management? And then you will come to affiliative leadership style. What is middle of the road management? Huh? Ah, welcome. Any other?
It's kind of conflict avoiding and
Yes.
you balance
Yes.
task you balance your task orientation
Yes.
and your relationship orientation.
Yes. You are looking for bonds in the team. You are looking for harmony in the team with avoiding conflict. So, middle of the road management, style approach, leadership grid, and affiliative leadership style has a strong interrelation. So it is best used when team coherence is very important, or if your employees have a low morale in the team. Then it is a useful leadership style, affiliative. But the approach is it's a little bit dangerous if the performance structure is very poor in the team. So always thinking on balancing your leadership style. There's another one we have found out in our discussions. It is the democratic leadership style in general. What is the democratic leadership style? What do you think? Or what is the focus on what is the focus in this style, democratic leadership style? Anybody an idea? Democratic leadership style. In this leadership behavior or in this style, you are building consensus through what? You are building consensus through which tool? If you think, for example, on our situational behavior approach, what is the leader doing in the situational approach? Please always try to connect your academic theories with practical questions. So you are connecting what? In this approach, you are connecting or building consensus through participation by the people in your decision-making process, in your negotiations, negotiation about ideas. Think on the LMX approach, leadership making. And the leadership making, the last phase, what was the last phase? That you build the people in, bring them in the demo, in your participation or in your decision-making processes. Participative leadership style. We have discussed in the situational approach and all the other approaches. And the newest approach, the Blue Ocean strategy, Blue Ocean leadership strategy is the newest approach. And invisible leadership is also a very new approach. Hickman and others. What are they saying? They say that you as a leader are offering leadership service and the followers buy your service or not. So this is another view of leadership. So democratic leadership style builds consensus through participation leadership style. It's most appropriate when organizational flexibility and a sense of an individual responsibility is needed. Then democratic leadership style will bring outcome. So this is the style number 3, number 4. Now, we have a style number 5, a general valid style number 5. It is the so-called pace-setting style. Pace-setting style. What is the pace-setting style? Pace-setting leadership behavior. This style expects what? If you are a pace setter, what do you expect from your employees? This is not in the book. What do you expect? Pace setting style. What do you have an idea? You? Pace setting? Think practical. You give the people space. What is giving the people space? You are delegating. And think on our situational leadership approach. Think on the curve. Here, level of the followers, development level, low, high, and then you have the curve. And this curve, the last part, has been the delegation style. And if you delegate, then you are expecting from your people high excellence. That the people are self-directed. That the people have big experience and you can delegate because you trust them, you like them, it's trustworthiness, integrity, all these characteristics you can find, and then you can pace set. Because you know that your people are skilled, very skilled, and that the people have a very high motivation to bring the best in their task. And then you can delegate if you trust them. Not all delegate, parts. Why do you delegate? What is the art of delegating? Delegating, everybody of us leaders delegate. I delegate too, but what is the art of delegating?
Transfer responsibility to other groups.
Yes, transfer responsibility and to bring the right balance that you optimize your time with more strategic tasks. Therefore, delegating is an art because you have to find the right people which you can delegate something. And therefore, in my opinion, this is practical opinion, delegating is leadership art. A good delegation process. It's not so easy. So pace setting is maybe a little problem. It could be a problem in which situation? In which situation could it be a problem if you are the pace setter? What could be the situation where it can be a problem? If you think on goal setting theories, there are 5 principles of goal setting, and one principle or 2 principles are very, very important. The one principle is having the feedback from the followers, and the next one is having the commitment from the followers to the goals. And if you're going to pace setting, and maybe your followers are excellent, but maybe they are overwhelmed with the task, then we have the same problem in pace setting style, that motivation will reduce. So, also in this behavior balancing. The next one and the last one is something from athletics. There is a style, maybe you all have heard from athletics. What could be an athletic or a leadership style which is dominant maybe in the athletic situation? Everybody knows it. Who has seen the soccer playing? Wolfsburg against Dortmund. Who has seen Klopp? What is Klopp? What is the profession of Klopp? the profession of clock is being an excellent coach. And the last style we want to discuss is coaching style. And if you think on situational behavior theory, we had also a coaching style. And what is coaching? What is coaching? Coaching and team leadership has a lot to do with athletics. Athletic or team athletic and team building. Coaching is a permanent way to improve. Improving skills from individuals, improving skills in the team. Coaching. This style focuses on personal development. This is a coaching style. And coaching lead or help the leaders to people that they can identify their own strengths and their own weaknesses. Coaching. So, but one style we have not discussed here, because there are other personalities who has a lot of more experience and knowledge, academic and practical. And therefore we have our guest today. This style is military leadership style, and we haven't discussed it, but we want to hear a lot today from our guest lecturer. And officially I welcome in our lecture, I welcome you in the Goethe University Frankfurt. I welcome you deeply in the House of Finance, Faculty of Economics, in the name of Goethe Finance Association. I welcome Lieutenant Colonel Daniel Robert Smith, Professor, Ph.D. from the U.S. Military Academy West Point, from U.S. Army, and you will give us a lecture about leadership. And I will first, before we start your guest lecture, give you some information about our very welcomed guest lecturer. Lieutenant Colonel Smith is an assistant professor of behavioral science and leadership at the United States Military Academy in West Point. He graduated from the USMA in '93 with a Bachelor of Science degree in Environmental Engineering. He holds the Master of Science degrees in Construction Management and Engineering Psychology, and he's a Doctor of Philosophy in Industrial and Organizational Psychology from the Georgia Institute of Technology. Lieutenant Colonel Smith's military education includes the Engineer Officer Basic and Advanced courses at the United States Army Command and General Staff College. He has served in a variety of commands, a really big variety. I have seen it and have read it, and staff assignments both in the continental United States and overseas. He served with the 17th and 299th Engineer Battalion at Fort Hood in Texas, 3rd Battalion, 10th Infantry Regiment at Fort Leonard Wood in Missouri, and the 101st Division Special Troops Battalion Task Force Gladiator of the 101 or 1st Airborne Division in Parwan and Kapisa provinces in Afghanistan. Lieutenant Colonel Smith commanded Bravo Company Infantry at Fort Leonard Wood and served as a battalion executive officer in Afghanistan. He taught combat engineering and tactics at the U.S. Army Engineer School from 1998 to 2001. He taught experimental psychology and biomechanics in the Department of Behavioral Sciences and leadership at the United States Military Academy from 2003 to 2006, and in 2012 he returned to West Point as a director and professor of the Leader Development Sciences major, where he teaches as a full professor military leadership, leadership in combat, organizational psychology, group dynamics, and leading organizations through change. Very interesting topic. And in addition to his research and teaching duties, Lieutenant Colonel Smith volunteers as an officer representative supporting both Army football, he's also Master of Fitness, and West Point's combat weapons team. And that's a very good additional message. We have him tomorrow in our boxing workout at 4 p.m. So all are invited. I have a lot of registration for this event tomorrow. But if you want to come, send me an email. Tomorrow, together with Lieutenant Colonel Smith, we have our fitness boxing workout at 4 p.m. You can see the address where we are meeting is on the GFA website, and you can send me an email and you are welcome. But now, a really great welcome. Thank you. It is your auditorium, Lieutenant Colonel.
Hello. My name is Lieutenant Colonel Daniel Smith, and today I'm here to talk to you about what private business leaders can learn from military leadership philosophy and tools. But first, I wanted to say thank you. I wanted to lead off by saying thank you. Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to come and speak about leadership with students at Westend University. When I was offered this opportunity, I was very excited to speak at an international university like Westend and to engage with students like yourself. I also wanted to thank you for the chance to experience the wonderful people, culture, and the natural beauty of Germany. My family came with me, and so it's my little boy who loves pretzels. That's mine, that's not his. And we were all over Germany and Bavaria and had a wonderful time. In Garmisch and in Heidelberg. And I would say that the people of Germany have been wonderfully patient and gracious and helpful, even though I don't speak the language. As a matter of fact, I was having a conversation with one gentleman, and he said, he was asking me, what's the word if you speak 3 or more languages? And I said, I think that's multilingual. He said, what is it if you only speak 2 languages? And he said, I think that's bilingual. He says, well, what if you only speak 1 language? I think then you're an American. And but Dr. Trummer said that it's okay if I only speak English. Because if I run into anybody who doesn't speak English, then all I need to do is speak English louder. I apologize for my corny joke. But I will try to speak clearly and slowly if people are having a little bit of a difficult time understanding. I thought today, before I talk about what private business leaders could learn from military leadership approaches, I thought I might talk a little bit about West Point in general and introduce you to the place where I teach cadets. West Point is a historic university in America. Our version of history, if it's 200 years old, it's really old. I realize that that's unique to America as well. But in 1802, West Point was established because our young nation needed engineers. At the time, most of the engineers that we had to help us build the nation really came from Europe. And we needed to educate our own engineers. And so they established the United States Military Academy at West Point to do two things. One was to produce engineers for a growing nation, and two was to produce military officers and leaders for a growing nation. So the mission of the United States Military Academy has been largely unchanged over those hundreds of years, but it is to educate, train, and inspire the Corps of Cadets so that each graduate of the Military Academy is a commissioned leader of character. We want our graduates to be committed to the values of duty, honor, and country, and we want them to be prepared for a career of professional excellence, where they serve the nation as an officer in the military. In an overview of the academy, there's approximately 4,400 students there. It's much smaller than Westend University. But the students come from all 54 U.S. states and territories. And we usually have about 60 foreign cadets from around the world that attend West Point each year. We provide the Army, the U.S. Army, with approximately 1,000 second lieutenants each year. And as a minimum, the students who graduate from West Point serve 5 years in the U.S. military. They come to school for free while they're at the military academy, but then they serve for 5 years mandatory service in the military. Approximately 75% of the students enter by nomination of their congressman. That's one way that we ensure that we get a student body that comes from all across the United States. About 25% of our incoming class each year comes straight out of the military. They're enlisted soldiers, and they're selected to go to West Point and become an officer. But the Corps of Cadets represents all segments of society in every region of America. Oftentimes people ask me, do you have to be politically connected to attend the military academy? At least that wasn't true in my case, and it's not true in many other people's cases. My father was a firefighter. My mother was a nurse, and so we really do represent all segments of society and from across all 50 states. Whether or not one is admitted to the academy really depends on one's potential to be a leader of character for the nation. It's very competitive. For each 1,200 students admitted, we get about 15,000 applicants. So of those 15,000 applicants, about 4,000 are nominated. Maybe 2,200 are truly qualified to be admitted, and only 1,200 are admitted each year. Their average SAT is about 1,200 out of 1,600. We get about in each class, about 82 of that 1,000 were the top academics in their high school class. They were presidents of their class. Almost all of them were captains of their captains of their athletic teams or varsity letter holders in high school. It's usually about 22% women, 14% African American, 10% Hispanic. We get about 14 international cadets each year that come for 4 years. And usually about 17 cadets in each incoming class are coming right out of the military, and they're combat veterans. At any one time at the military academy, there's about 57 cadets from 32 countries that are our friends and allies. For example, students from the German military. And we also have 29 cadets from 8 countries that come as exchange students in the fall of each year. Usually about 37 cadets from about 8 different countries come for summer training each year. to train with us. Our faculty at West Point is made up of about 52% active duty Army officers who are not permanent professors. I'm not a permanent professor at West Point. I have a career that means I will be in the operational Army, deployed potentially Afghanistan or wherever the Army is engaged. So I will do an assignment there and I'll come back to West Point and teach. I'll go back to the operational Army, lead soldiers, and I'll come back to West Point and teach. Only about 19% of the Army officers, of the faculty is Army officers that stay at West Point. And we have about 30% of our faculty that is civilian professors, civilian Ph.D.s. We think it's important that about 30% of our faculty not be military, so that we don't have only one militaristic way of thinking. We want to have a diversity of thought as we engage students and develop them over their 4 years. A typical day for a cadet usually begins at about 0600 in the morning. They'll do exercise, they have breakfast formation at 7 o'clock. Then they're in class until 11:55. They'll have a lunch formation. They attend lunch. They all eat, all 4,400 cadets eat in about 20 minutes. They eat at tables of 10 and they eat family style in the mess hall. And they eat about 20 minutes. Then they'll have class again until about 16:15, where the whole corps, all 4,400 of them, will then engage in athletics. At 18:30, they'll have dinner. Then they study from 7:30 to 11:30, and they go to sleep to do it the next day. It's a rather challenging 4 years of intense development. We're very proud of our accomplishments in that each year in the college rankings in the U.S., last year we were the number 2 liberal arts college in America, the number 3 best undergraduate program in engineering. Princeton Review ranked us number 1 for intramural sports, number 1 for the most accessible professors. The students that study organizational psychology with me, they all have my cell phone number. And if they're studying for a class and they call me at 10:30 at night, I pick up the phone. All the students they take physics in classes of 15 students, and the same thing. Most of them, they all have their instructor's cell phone number, because the investment that we make in these young people, we think is that important, that their development is important to the nation as they will become our future leaders. When you bring in high-quality young people and you invest in them as heavily as we invest in them, they tend to do well and have many achievements. These are our scholarship winners from the year 2000, from the class of 2014. Since 2010, we've had 8 Truman Scholars and 6 Rhodes Scholars who have earned scholarships to go on to study at the graduate level, 7 Marshall Scholars. Overall, we've had 94 Rhodes Scholars and 50 Rotary Scholars. Some of the current nation's leaders that were educated at West Point include Mr. Jack Reed, a senator from Rhode Island, Mr. Alex Horsky, the CEO of Johnson & Johnson. We've educated 2 U.S. presidents, 4 heads of state. We've had 4 5-star generals, 37 governors. And in our history, we've produced a long line of generals that have shaped history. And so that's a little bit of an introduction to West Point. It's an honor for me to teach there. I find the students to be wonderful, and I very much enjoy my interaction with them. But when we have that sort of a track record of producing great leaders of character, civilian leaders often come and they want to know, they ask that question, what can private business leaders learn from the way the military develops leaders? And when I answer that question, there's really two ways I can answer it. One answer is sort of broad and programmatic. And to give you that answer, I'll talk a little bit about the West Point Leader Development System. What happens in the 47 months when a cadet is at West Point? The way we understand the development of young people into leaders of character is it's actually a combination of 4 different curriculums, right? So there's 4 different curriculums that's focused on multiple facets of an individual. We want to develop people intellectually. We want to develop people militarily. And when I say develop them militarily, what I mean is they have to learn the industry-specific knowledge of the knowledge, skills, and abilities that will require that they'll be required to use as leaders of military organizations. For you, for example, if you were going to adapt this or create your own leader development strategy, you would want to put some effort into developing yourself intellectually, like you are now, going to pursuing an education so that you can develop yourself intellectually. You might not focus personally on developing military skills, but you might focus on developing skills for whatever industry you want to lead in, right? We also think that 2 other important ways that people need to develop if they're going to be great leaders is they need to develop physically and they need to develop in terms of character, their integrity, and their values. So we have 4 different curriculums that are woven together over 47 months to shape the way students are educated. In each of those curriculums, what we try to do is give them developmental experiences. Those developmental experiences are characterized by challenge. We want them to be challenged by their classes, challenged by the physical program, challenged by the character development program. So those developmental experiences are characterized by challenge. But they're also characterized by support and assessment. So we help students prepare, we get them ready for these challenges, we give them the developmental experiences, and then we have them, as they reflect on those experiences over time, that results in human development. So in each curriculum, our educational system is built around a set of sequential challenges that develop people over 4 years. Because we think intellectual development is important to leaders, all the students at West Point earn a Bachelor of Science degree. That isn't necessarily the case at military academies around the world. Sometimes military academies are very focused only on military skills. But we've decided, we feel that the intellectual development is very important. So it's often been said that, what is education? Education is what remains after you've forgotten everything that you've learned in school. There will be a time where you won't remember anything that you've learned in school. what you have over these years at university, you've developed some very important things. The capacity to learn, right? The capacity to think critically about ideas, the ability to research and find information, and to articulate your ideas in a coherent way. Those are just some of the things that your education is going to impart to you. And so, for us, we have a core curriculum that's very broad and robust in terms of they take 3 classes in English and literature. They take 4 math classes, 2 chemistry classes, a lot of science and technology. They take 2 to 3 years of a foreign language. I guess I'm an example of the fact that you will forget some things that you learned in college. But I do still speak some Spanish from my years. And then they have 8 to 12 classes over their 4 years that they can choose. And in those 8 to 12 classes, they can choose from one of 37 different majors. And the cadets, I said that some of the experiences are challenging. The cadets like to say that guns don't kill people, physics kills people. Because physics is one of the classes that challenges them significantly. So that was intellectual development. That's one aspect of leader development at West Point. The next one I'd like to talk to you about is military development. Over their 4 years at the academy, students are developed from followers to leaders. In the beginning, in their first year or their freshman year, they come for basic military training, and in that basic military training, they are followers, not necessarily leaders at the beginning. They get an introduction to warfighting skills and tasks. In their second year, they're promoted from cadet private to cadet corporal. So for the first time, they're in charge of somebody in their second year. They're in charge of privates, and they're in charge of the training of the cadet privates. And in their second year, they go to cadet field training, where they learn the fundamentals of Army operations, or small unit leadership. In their third year, they'll go to some military schools, some Army schools like the Airborne School, which is skydiving, and the Air Assault School, which is a helicopter attack, so rappelling out of helicopters. And then they also, in their third year, they become cadet sergeants. And so they're in charge of larger organizations like platoons. In their fourth year, they become cadet officers, and they become leaders of the Corps. So there is a sequential building of responsibility in the cadets over 4 years. Some of the military training that I get to do working with cadets, these are the cadets from the Combat Weapons Team working on room clearing. I got to take 5 of them to train with the 5th Special Forces at Fort Campbell. We did a month of live fire training with the 5th Special Forces in Fort Campbell last summer. Here's some other pictures of the military training. Teamwork development, teaching new cadets. This is a cadet sergeant teaching new cadets customs and courtesies of the military during their basic training. Negotiations training and cross-cultural competence. And also military drill, which is really a large exercise in teamwork and precision. So that was their intellectual and military development. Another piece of the curriculum is really focused on their physical development. Over their 4 years at the academy, cadets take a number of different courses that are meant to develop them physically. They take boxing and combatives as freshmen. Military movement is really gymnastics. And speaking of challenging situations, so I myself, you can tell by looking at me, I'm not necessarily a gymnast. I grew up playing football, American football, and so when I came to West Point and was required to engage in gymnastics, it challenged me to be an athlete in a way I was not an athlete. To do a pommel horse routine for somebody that weighs 225 pounds was a challenge. I was lucky that I had some support, and I managed to get through that. But I think it developed me. It developed my character to have to struggle to be an athlete in a way I wasn't an athlete, and it also developed some humility for sure. In the second year, they take survival swimming. In their third year, as a junior, they take combat applications where it's mixed martial arts combined with weapons. In their fourth year, we actually take a lifetime sport, which is meant to develop in adults a desire to stay fit over a lifetime. So a lifetime sport might be golf. It might be tennis. It's often boxing. All right? As part of our physical development program, every cadet is an athlete on some team. Whether it be hockey, sailing, boxing, American football, rugby. We're very proud of our rugby team. They won the U.S. National Championship. We get beat up by the European teams, but in the U.S. we're number one. So soccer and boxing. People often ask if the female cadets box, and the answer to that is yes, because every Army officer at some point is likely to lead soldiers in a fight. And we think part of the human development that should be required of someone who's going to lead other people in a fight is that at some point you should have taken a punch and given a punch. Maybe tasted your own blood at some point in your life if you're going to lead other people in combat. And so it's part of our development, part of their physical development and their character development. Last and probably most importantly is an aspect of our development program that's focused on character development. So if we're going to be a leader, especially in today's world where right and wrong is so hotly debated, and where an individual's moral decisions can mean the difference between success and failure of nations, banks, and it can cost people their livelihoods. We think it's very important that we develop people in terms of their character. For us, our character development curriculum is focused on two things. One is the honor code, and the other is the professional military ethic. The honor code states that a cadet, really an officer, will not lie, cheat, steal, or tolerate those who do. Many honor codes they'll be fine with the first part. Lie, cheat, or steal. Don't lie, cheat, or steal. Our honor code goes one step further in that it's my duty. I'm not just responsible for my integrity. I'm responsible for the integrity of the person on my left and right. So in other words, if one of my cadets is in class and he sees a classmate, he or she sees a classmate cheating, it's their responsibility to turn in that classmate. because they're responsible for the integrity of the Corps of Cadets, not just their own integrity. And that is often something that cadets struggle with. I mean, you can imagine the loyalties that you have to your classmates here at Goethe University. And you can imagine how hard it would be to turn in a friend for cheating. But we feel that it's a measure of your character, not just only that you wouldn't do it, but you wouldn't tolerate it in others. We're trying to develop them in really 5 different ways. Trying to develop in them moral character, sort of internalization of certain values that gives them knowledge and the awareness and the integrity to take appropriate action regardless of the consequences to themselves. We want to develop in them an aspect of character that we call performance. In other words, a sense of duty and grit, a warrior ethos that enables them to persevere and accomplish the mission in the face of great trials and tribulations. We also want to develop an aspect of their character that we're calling civic. I mean, develop an empathy in them that allows them to act with loyalty, respect, and humility. And the last aspect of individual character that we're trying to develop, what we call leadership, is the ability to inspire and develop others and develop a positive command climate. And social, the ability to act with proper professional decorum. Those are all aspects of their character that our character development program is trying to develop. So that's one, when private leaders in private industry come to West Point and they say, how do you develop leaders? That's one answer. It's very broad and programmatic. I think those 4 curriculums could be adopted by any company, any university, even high schools could say, if we want to develop leaders, we need to develop multiple facets of them. If I was BMW, I could say, I'm going to develop my own leaders. I want to develop them intellectually. Maybe there's some combination of experience and education that takes place to develop a BMW executive. There's probably some analogy to military development, a military curriculum where they are immersed in the industry of the auto industry and the production of automobiles. Then we would also have some focus on physical development and some focus, importantly, on character development. And I think any university or really any person could decide that if you want to develop yourself as a leader, maybe you personally could think of designing your own 4-pronged attack to develop yourself as a leader. You're in college, you're developing yourself intellectually. What are you doing to develop yourself physically? And what are you doing to develop your own character, your sense of integrity and social responsibility? I imagine that people in this room are engaged in many activities that are analogous to what we design for cadets. For example, who here has a physical development regimen for themselves? Anybody want to share it? What's yours? Come on.
I'm going to the gym.
So you go to the gym on a regular basis. Right. What about character development? Who here is explicitly thinks about the development of their own character, about who the person that they want to be. When you think about it, what do you do to develop your own character?
Now I'm attending a course that not really teaches you, but it helps you discover your own strengths and weaknesses and your capabilities, and it just makes you think about them through different methods.
I mean, I think many people stumble through life and they never give any serious thought to what their core values are. And they never give any serious thought to the leader they want to be, or the wife or husband they want to be. And you can make yourself a better leader of the organizations you're in, of your family. If like, what's your name? If like Kim, you dedicate some time and effort into thinking about what you want your core values to be and who do you want to be years from now. Because if you let that happen by accident, it's not necessarily a sure thing that you will develop into the person that you aspire to be. You kind of have to decide on a daily basis and put some effort into becoming that person. Right? So character development, physical development. Who here already knows what industry they want to work in? This I wouldn't necessarily expect that you do know, but maybe some people do. Does anybody know what industry they want to work in? No idea yet? I mean, that'll be an important part of your development as a leader, is that once you get into the job market and figure out that you're going to pursue some discipline, whether it be marketing or finance or like we said, the car industry, you're going to have to learn an awful lot about that industry. And as you develop yourself in that knowledge and those skills that are going to enable you to lead in that industry, you'll be engaging in leader development. Part of what will allow you to develop those industry-specific knowledge and skills is the intellectual development that you're working on right now as college students. So when people ask, what can civilian leaders learn from military leadership, one answer is broad and programmatic. Another answer, though, that I can give is more narrow in scope. Because oftentimes when people come to West Point, they want to know, we have a core course called Military Leadership. And that course really focuses on teaching cadets about human behavior in organizations. I suspect that much of what you've studied with Dr. Trummer has been some of these ideas. And I wasn't sure where to go from this point, because there's a lot of different topics that we teach cadets about as we develop them as leaders. And I thought I might, at this point, kind of leave it open to a discussion with each of you about which topics you have found most interesting. Because as I develop cadets at West Point, each of these areas are things that I talk to them about. We study the science of human motivation, for example, because I think that if you're going to be a leader, if you have some evidence-based understanding of human motivation, then you might be able to use that knowledge to be a better leader. Organizational culture, organizational change, organizational justice. Like, how do people perceive justice in organizations? These are all areas that there's been academic work in where people have studied how people perceive justice. And we can draw on psychology, the field of management, social psychology, organizational psychology, and sociology, which is the study of human institutions, to answer some of these questions. To what degree are you interested in some of these topics? Have you studied some of these in this class? I'm too far away from you, so I'm going to walk around. What are your thoughts on military versus civilian? Do you think human motivation is different in military versus civilian? What are your thoughts?
I think motivation is the same for both parts. So you can lead in both parts slightly the same way in some situations.
In your experience, what is it that motivates people? Or have you ever had to motivate someone? How did you do it?
To show them the benefits for them.
To show them the benefits for them. So there is a theory of human motivation called expectancy theory, right? And it's focused on the rewards that people get. It's the realization that you can motivate people with rewards. And if you have a reward that they value, and you can increase their expectancy that if they achieve some performance outcome, they'll get that reward, that can result in motivation. But we call that extrinsic motivation or external motivation. But there's another kind of motivation called intrinsic motivation, which I think you guys have studied a little bit about. How do you leverage intrinsic motivation? What are some of the things that you find intrinsically motivating? What do you?
Probably stuff like personal success, character development, getting a better person, being better, I don't know, bigger as context.
I mean, you can think about what are some of the things you do with your free time. What are some of the things you do with your free time?
To motivate myself.
Yeah.
Improve my knowledge.
So you're intrinsically motivated to learn, right? There's another theory. Researchers who study human motivation have generated a theory called self-determination theory that says that people are motivated by the opportunity to develop themselves. Right? That they want to be autonomous and they want to chase competence, right? Mastery of something. And so you can leverage that as well. And so there's a combination of choosing people whose intrinsic motives lend themselves, if they believe what you believe, if they want to serve what you serve, right, then you can leverage their intrinsic motives, and you can also, at the same time, integrate external rewards that can motivate them, right? And I find that I don't see that there's a tremendous difference between people who are military and people who are civilian. Oftentimes I'll hear civilian leaders will come and they'll say, well, you know, it's so much easier for you, you just give orders, right? Well, soldiers are just automatons, they just, you know, right? Is that, in my experience, I don't find that to be true. I find that civilian soldiers have a special kind of discipline, but I don't find them to be automatons. They definitely need. The only person that asks more why than my 4-year-old asks why more than my 4-year-old is my soldiers. So, what are some of the things that, as you've studied leadership in this class, has there been any moments where you wondered about military leadership or civilian leadership? Any topics that? Go ahead.
Well, not in this class, but I would be interested in the point ethical use of lethal force, because that's something we don't, well, it's nothing that confronts us as a civilian.
Sure.
So
Yeah.
what do you talk about in this class?
So when I teach in that class, I talk, one of the very important things about military leadership is the military uses force, right? I mean, so if we are to achieve strategic objectives, we have to use that force ethically. So how do you use lethal, how do you ethically kill somebody, right? Any thoughts on that? When is it okay? Go ahead.
The moment he wants to kill me.
In the moment he wants to kill you. Self-defense. Right? So, but it turns out the military has two authorizations to use lethal force. Right? To use force that might take someone's life. One is self-defense. And that's the same, actually you have that right. You could use lethal force in self-defense. Right? In that way, the military is no different than any civilian. So everyone has the right to defend themselves. But military forces are different in that they're the only group that the government has given the power to use force offensively. Right? So, and this means that if there is an enemy of your nation and you can identify them, you can kill them in an offensive manner. Right? So if you can find a target, positively identify that target, and engage it, you're free to do so. Right? Under certain specific situations when that authorization has been given. The problem is that at least recently, over the last 15 years, the enemy isn't running around wearing Al-Qaeda t-shirts. So that makes life difficult. The enemy also has a propensity to locate in places where it's very difficult to target them. If you're in a mosque, the costs of targeting enemy forces that are in a mosque can be high. I mean, that can actually work against our objectives. It'd be much more damaging to our objectives to kill them while they're in the mosque than or if they're next to a school or any place else. So it starts to get hairy. At what point can we engage them? And so, and what's been happening more and more in our military experience overseas has been that we end up mostly in self-defense situations. And so people have to understand it's very difficult to find and target the enemy in an offensive manner. We end up engaging the enemy largely when they engage us. So we go about our business every day of trying to develop governance in a war-torn nation. Some rule of law, some government services, some clean water, we're trying to develop a semblance of peace. And in the process, the enemy will find you, because if you start doing that well, that doesn't help them get power. Right? And so when the enemy finds you, we will often find ourselves in a self-defense situation. Right? But how does one determine whether it was an appropriate use of self-defense? I think we definitely see in America oftentimes where lethal force is used by the police and people don't feel that it was just. And the policeman might say, I feel like that was reasonable to protect myself. I felt my life was threatened. So we teach cadets about three considerations. of when it's reasonable to use force in self-defense. One is capability, opportunity, second is opportunity, and the third is intent. So when is it reasonable to think that that my life is in danger, right? One depends, does this person have the capability to hurt me, right? Do they have a club? Do they have a knife? Do they have a gun, right? Do they have the capability, right? Do they have the opportunity? Are they within striking distance of hurting me, right? The last one's tough, intent. You have to judge whether or not that person has the intent to hurt you, right? And that gets to be pretty hairy. And people will disagree about decisions that were made in the heat of the moment. And we know from our study of human behavior, when people are scared or they're under stress, it warps the way they see the world. Right? It's pretty easy, and I've done this in training with civilians and military alike. It's pretty easy to put people in situations where they're under stress and they're afraid. And they're not even afraid of being killed. They're being afraid of shot with a paintball, right? And you'd be surprised how easy it is to make a mistake and shoot somebody holding a cell phone because you thought it was a gun, right? Or once people are trained and they realize that someone who's at 30 feet, 30 feet away, holding a knife, can get to you and stab you before you can disable them with a gun. That sort of training helps people understand when use of lethal force is reasonable and when it isn't. I think oftentimes people who observe the aftermath of a lethal force event, they're like, well, why couldn't you just shoot him in the leg? Or, you know, he had a gun, that person had a knife. Why would you be afraid, right? There's some misconceptions out there largely based in Hollywood. People think that if I shoot you, that you're going to fly backwards through a plate glass window and explode, right? Because that's what always happens in Hollywood, right? But wound ballistics just don't work that way. You know, unless they hit your central nervous system or break a bone, you are still operational and really still a threat. So, I've seen people shot 14 times and live and still fight. Like, been shot 14 times. So, oftentimes in America, they'll be like, he shot him 15 times. Why did he shoot him 15 times? That was unfair force, right? Well, I shot him 15 times because he had a gun. I thought he was going to kill me, and he didn't die, right? These are all interesting aspects of that debate. But the proper use of lethal force requires that people understand the law, they understand ethics, they understand psychology, they understand weapons, they understand tactics. There's an awful lot of knowledge that has to be integrated for a military soldier or a police officer to do their job well when it comes to wielding lethal force.
But I mean, you just can't be 100% sure whether the kind of training is then successful in this specific situation. I mean, as you just pointed out, in those stressful situations, sometimes the mind is doing other things.
We'll see things that's not there.
Yeah.
Right?
And so, how can you make sure that the candidates, are kind of behaving the maximum of ethic, of the ethical behavior with specific task?
I think the most important thing I can do is try to put them in situations that are realistic. And those simulated situations we can create with computer simulations. But some of the best simulations, like I alluded to the use of what we call simulated ammunition. So it looks like an actual bullet, but it launches a little paintball round, right? And it hurts a lot. But it would not kill you. But as long as we have eye protection on, it puts the young officer in a situation where it simulates the same sort of stress, right? And we can put them in situations that are complicated and where there's a lot of different people going on. So in any situation in Afghanistan, for example, 99% of the people don't need to be shot, right? If I am going into a complex attempting to find an individual, right, there will be, you can imagine when the military enters an area, there will be a little bit of pandemonium. There will be scared civilians that are running. There'll be people that are come up to you and aren't a threat. They're just scared, right? And so we put them in that situation, and when they make mistakes, or we ask them, well, what was it about that person that caused you to fear for your life, right? Or what was it about the way they were behaving? Sort of these behavioral indicators, you know. We teach people to recognize certain behavioral indicators. I don't know that it's ever going to be a perfect system, because the human is in the loop, and even if the human wasn't in the loop, you know, we don't have automated intelligence that's capable of determining which targets are valid and which aren't. But we can do a lot to prepare people to make decisions in situations where the information isn't correct and lives are on the line, and there's fear, real fear. And we really do it by practice. Yeah. Yeah. What other... Well, I think as we come to an end, I'd like to ask you to tell me a little bit about your idea of excellent leadership. Because I want to learn a little bit about, I've got a great international audience here, and I'm hoping that I can learn a little bit about what you believe excellent leadership is. So if you would for a second, and all of you have been leaders, you've been leaders on teams, you've experienced leaders, you've had teachers, you've had coaches, you've had your parents. When you think of the best leaders in your lives, what would you tell me about them? Any one thing that you could tell me about the best leader in your life. Can you tell me something about the best leader that you know?
Me?
Yeah.
Yes. I come from Thailand, first of all.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you guys know about my team. And like, there used to be a saying, like, our team have 10 ethics to lead all of Thai people. And like, they are about moral ethics, like about good and wrong. Yeah.
Right and wrong.
Yeah, right and wrong. And I think that's like the best example for me. But I don't know how to explain it in all words, like from 1 to 10. Yeah.
But I think I get it though. Is that when you think of the best leader that you know, character is something that comes through. Character and integrity.
Yeah.
Right?
Like integrity and sympathy toward people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Empathy for other people. All right. Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm glad to know that, because it validates a little bit of, you know, what we're trying to do with cadets is develop character. And if that's important in other cultures as well as my own, then I think we're on the right track a little bit, right? I'm more confident that we're pursuing the right ends as we develop people, because character is important.
Yeah.
Whether you're in Thailand or Germany or America. What else?
To me, a leader is someone who motivates and also inspires trust and also security. Someone who's decisive, but who also brings along the necessary capability and just basic knowledge to, well, inspire this trust in his or her abilities, and who's also willing to basically lead and make a decision in the end.
So there's a degree of competence, of knowledge, right?
Yes, but not only knowledge, also the willingness to apply this knowledge to make a decision. I believe in making a decision.
To take responsibility, right? To take responsibility for making the decision, right? So part of what we're doing as we develop cadets at West Point is, in the military curriculum, is developing the knowledge they need to be competent so that they can decide, right? Because it's hard to be decisive if you don't have the knowledge, right? So I think that's an important aspect. Is you have to be competent in your field if you're going to be a great leader. So we've got character and we've got competence, right? And not only, so it's almost that the competence or the job-specific skills that you need in order to make the decision, that works with character, because you have to have the character required to make a decision and be willing to be held responsible for it. Right? Okay. Maybe over here. What are your thoughts?
Well, I think that, well, as I worked in an internship, I had a very great boss, and he was like a big brother for me. It was more like I didn't come to the internship because of the work or the money. It was just about because I like my work. I believe in it. So that was my motivation, and not money or anything else.
Right. So you had this intrinsic motivation for your work, and you also had someone who cared about you.
Yeah, of course. So the job interview was not about my skills, about the, well, it was also about my skills. About the first 30 minutes were about what I'm doing, talk about family, talk about my motivation, did I travel the world, what about my, how do I improve my skills, how do I manage my time, and that was more important for him, as he wants to know what do I learn in university, because most things we learn here are not that important for the job. I think it's more like to learn many things about yourself, and not about what you really do in life or your job.
So an important part of leadership for you was this person taking a personal interest in your development.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other thoughts? Yeah.
I'd say a great leader is somebody who can adapt to different situations and who can really assess what the situation requires of him. For example, his team members or his brothers, to put it that way, would feel unconfident with the task in his direction, and supports them and guides them. But then on the other hand, if they're really confident with their work, that he tries to push them, provide some new challenges in order that they can grow and develop.
So someone who's aware of their surroundings and their situation.
Right.
Well, I want to thank you again for giving me the opportunity to engage with you and talk about leadership with you. I hope I gave you a little bit of information about the way we develop leaders at West Point, both in a large programmatic way, but also in a narrower scope of how we teach cadets about human behavior in organizations. I think much of your ideas about leadership are not necessarily context specific. Most people who think that military leadership is very different from civilian leadership, most of them don't know anything about the military that they didn't see from a Hollywood movie. They have poor stereotypes of military leaders, military leadership, and military institutions. It's been my experience over 22 years that human nature is the same. The situation is different, the industry is different. Yes, some of the places where I take soldiers are very dangerous, and our business is serious, but that doesn't mean that they don't want to know that I'm willing to take responsibility, right? And they want to know that I'm competent enough to make a decision, and that they can believe in my decision, and that I'll have the character to take responsibility for that decision, right? They want to know that I have integrity and morals, and that we're going to do the right thing, right? And not only am I going to do the right thing, I'm not going to allow leaders on my left and right to behave poorly. Right? They want to know, soldiers want to know that I care about them, right? And that I'm going to do what needs to be done to help them become the person they want to be. Both personally, as a family person, and as a professional.
Good. Sometimes, of course, it is, well, in your profession, I think it is very, very difficult to find a decision between seconds of, between very short time. Like you worked in Afghanistan, for example. And if you, well, I have never been in Afghanistan, but I try to find out what happens. You're in the field in Afghanistan, and in your surrounding are many enemies, but you don't know who is the enemy, who tries to shoot you before you can shoot.
Right.
Yes. And it makes indeed, from my point of view, a difference in connection with your job, or with your duty, and in comparison to my job I did in the company where I was a leader in the company, where I have much more time, for example, to find a decision. And I can try to, we say, upbeat. What do you say? Well, I try to compare different possibilities of finding the right decisions. I think there's a difference. Maybe I'm wrong, but
I say yes, you're right. But also, in some ways, there's similarities. And here's how I would point out the similarities. Whether or not there's going to be a roadside bomb that attacks one of my patrols today depends incredibly heavily on my relationships. The relationships I've built with the locals. Right? So as I engage with them, like do they trust me? Do they believe that I'll do what I say I'm going to do? Have I delivered on my partnership with them? And what's interesting, especially in some of these places like Afghanistan, is when they want you to succeed, they can't always openly help you, because like my soldiers I used to tell my soldiers when they would get angry, they'd be like, why did the people in that village allow this bomb to get set in? Why didn't they tell us? You know? And what I would tell my soldiers is you can't blame people in Little Italy because the mafia does what it wants down there. Little Italy is something that we have in America where often in our cities, if all the Italians live in this area, we'll call it Little Italy, you know. And I would tell them you can't blame Little Italy because you can't blame the people because the mafia does what they want down there. They're afraid, right? And so when we build great relationships with them, then they tell us about things. They get us information, right? And we can stay out of those situations where those split-second decisions take place. And the other thing is that I imagine that as a leader, in your field, you had to have the competence to see the lay of the land and to see the patterns emerging, right? And to make decisions, right? So as a military leader, you have the same sort of thing. In Afghanistan, when we started getting attacks, we would plot on the, in terms of, we had an illustration of the attacks that went around the clock, and the geographic areas of the attacks were around a circle. Like this would be if it happened in a certain area, a little bit wider, and we would plot them in time and space, and we'd start to see the pattern of when attacks were taking place at what time of day. Then we could start the back plan, and we would say, okay, so if we tend to get a lot of roadside bombs on this stretch of road, and they tend to be blown up at 8 o'clock in the morning, they're probably being put in at 6 o'clock and 6 o'clock, sometime between 6 o'clock and 3 in the morning is when those bombs are being put in. So, and we started to put snipers in observation posts, and we could watch that stretch of road during the time when we suspect the enemy's going to come put in a bomb, and lo and behold, here they come, shovels. They're putting in, taking those old artillery shells, and they're rigging them up, and that's one of the moments where we can target the enemy in an offensive manner, right? So, yes, it's different, and yes, it's the same, right? Because I imagine in your business, it's about relationships, it's about seeing the emerging patterns, and about making those decisions, right? In combat leadership, it's similar. It's relationships, intelligence, seeing the emerging patterns, and putting your forces in a position where they can win. Okay? Similar? Somewhat.
I just have another question. How do you prepare the cadets for moments when they don't agree with their comments? And I don't think that every soldier, for example, agrees on the government's opinion on some missions, and how do you prepare them? Do you encourage them to be critical, but they don't have the possibility to stop working because they have to execute the orders? So how do you...
This is a great question. It's a great question. And in our character development curriculum, we spend a lot of time talking about our professional military ethic. What it means to be an officer and a servant of the nation, right? And one of the things that cadets struggle with is this very question: is what if I don't understand or I don't believe about the strategic objective of invading Iraq, right? How do I come to terms with that as a leader? Within our professional military ethic, we talk about, I'm a servant of the nation. I do what the nation asks me to do. There may be moments when our civilian leaders direct our military, they're making a strategic blunder, right? There may be those moments. And yet, I've accepted that it's not my role. My role is not to make those decisions. That an important part of our military tradition is that I'm subordinate to civilian leadership. And so the president gives the orders. And the president and Congress make our policy. And I'm in charge of executing the policy as well as I possibly can. When we have this discussion with cadets, I often say, I'll make a sports analogy. I'll say, in American football, we might argue about whether we should go up the middle, pitch out to the left, or pitch out to the right. And maybe the right decision is to pass at any given time, right? And maybe the coach is going to make the wrong decision. But if I execute that well, then good things can come of it, right? That my job as a professional Army officer is to lead, because my soldiers are going to go. I mean, I could quit. I could resign my commission and say, I don't agree, I'm out, right? My soldiers are still going to go. Who's going to lead them? Who's going to who's going to be responsible for them? Who's going to make sure that they're well led, well resourced, and taken care of? I mean, that's my responsibility, and that's where oftentimes I will, if I were to ever disagree with the strategic objective, I would set that aside, because my role as a servant of the nation is to take care of my soldiers and execute the policy as well as possible. And sometimes we call it, you know, when life gives you lemons, you make lemonade. Sometimes I'm making lemonade, you know, and it's hard. But I feel like if I didn't do it, then who would? Like, who would lead my soldiers if I didn't? I think that's something that every individual officer has to struggle with and come to terms with, is the role of our military in our society being subordinate to civilian rule.
How do you cope with situations that you might have done in kind of those split-second decisions that had a bad outcome?
Oh, yeah.
For example, I don't know, some of your subordinates lost their lives. I mean, I don't know, it's just possible. How did you, as a consequence, then cope with those bad decisions, and how does this affect your decisions in the future?
That's a great question. Because no one's perfect. And for example, if I plan an operation and that operation has gone poorly and one of my soldiers has been killed, and there's several kinds of mistakes that take place. War is a messy business, and I could make a mistake and get my soldiers killed, or one of my soldiers could make a mistake at a checkpoint, and this another type of mistake that happened when I was in Afghanistan is we were running a traffic checkpoint. A car came up to the checkpoint, ignored many commands, and my soldiers engaged that vehicle because they felt it was a car bomb, right? Because it was driving around, it was and approaching, and they thought it was a car bomb. They engaged it. And it turns out that the driver was drunk, and his wife was in the car, and they were having an argument, and you know, it did not. That was, I don't know if you. It was a terrible outcome. I can tell you the only thing I can tell you is that in those situations I've taken responsibility for it. I've acknowledged for my soldiers that decision was mine, and that I made it the best I could. I find that my soldiers understood how I could have made that mistake. And they were willing to forgive me and follow me still. I think partially because I was willing to take responsibility for what I had done wrong. And because they believed in my competence overall, and that I would learn from that situation. So when I made mistakes that ended badly, I took responsibility for those mistakes. When my soldiers have made mistakes that ended badly, like in that example, I did not judge them on the outcome. I would not judge them in 20/20 hindsight. Does that phrase make sense to you? There's a phrase in English that says, the quality of someone's vision is 20/20 if it's perfect. You see at 20 feet what everybody else sees at 20 feet. When they test people's eyes, if you have 20/20 vision, you have perfect vision, right? And we say that hindsight is always 20/20. That people looking at events after they happen always have perfect vision, right? Did I explain that one? So I refuse to judge my soldiers in the 20/20 vision of hindsight. I have to put myself in their shoes, know what they knew with their level of training, and confront what they confronted. And in that situation, I have to judge, was it reasonable for them to use lethal force? Was it reasonable for them to fear for their life? That's a hard task. They had to judge whether or not this vehicle was a lethal threat. You know, the driver's behaving erratically. You know, they see, you know, expressions of people, you know, kind of arguing inside. The driver's, you know, backs up, drives around a barrier, starts coming straight at them. At that moment, I can understand being scared for my life. And they engage the driver and kill him. That's in that situation. I just wrote the report and I backed them up, and well, I took responsibility for what they did. Said I'm willing to answer for what my soldiers have done here. And there's no way that, you know, when a mistake like that happens and you kill somebody that you would not, given the opportunity not to, you would have chosen not to kill that person. You can't make that family whole, but you can earnestly apologize. You can make efforts to make amends in whatever way possible. Right? And we did those things. So, yeah.
Can military leaders take advice from their soldiers, or is it just...
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. The question was, can military leaders take advice from their soldiers? Every day. The best military leaders do. You know? When I was in Afghanistan, I had soldiers that had been 3 or 4 deployments. They knew, many of my soldiers knew the surrounding area better than I did. Some of them spoke the language. They were just incredibly influential in my knowing what to do. Was my ability to listen to the people around me. The decision in the end was mine, but the more I listened, the better decisions I was able to make.
Like in private industry.
Say again?
Like in private industry.
Yeah, just like in private industry. So, right. I think we're coming towards the end. I do want to thank you again. Thanks for the chance to talk to you about leadership and about the military. And thanks again for inviting me to Germany. I've had a wonderful experience. Thank you.
Discussion and your support and your knowledge for us was absolutely fantastic. Now, one moment. We have a gift for you, and it is from a student organization. And it is an actress, and we go all forward. We make a picture together here, and then we want to give you this. We want to give you this gift. So one moment. So.
Can we have a picture with everybody?
All are coming here, and we make a picture together. First, we want to give you these practice on your life history.
Yeah, but
So, okay, please come all here and we make a photo together. Please all here. Okay. Perfect. Stand here. Perfect. So, go here together. Okay. So, all together. All right. Yeah. So, okay. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much. Thank you. Have a great evening. Thank you very much for attending.